Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of my videos, and today we're going to be looking at another second move alternative that you can see after the moves 1, e4, e5, knight to f3, something that's known as the elephant gambit. Pretty scary line to come up against. Now I myself have played the elephant gambit quite a bit, and it's a great little shock weapon that black can play to equalise the game very comfortably. However, as we're going to see, just like with the Latvian gambit, white should be able to hold an edge against it. Let's take a look at the following lines. Okay, so let's see how we reach this particular gambit. So the elephant gambit can be reached via the move order 1e4, which we've been recommending so far in our 1e4 white opening repertoire guide. And after e5 and knight f3, the most logical move, developing towards the centre, attacking this pawn, black can now go for this very unusual gambiting move, the move d5. Now, what this move does is that black is offering two different choices of recapture from white. In doing so, he's allowing him to develop his bishops out very quickly and hoping that he can generate some good piece activity for the gambited pawn. Now, I will be honest here with you. I would say, compared to our last video when we were looking at the Latvian gambit, I would say that white should have an easier time getting a good edge against most of the moves that black can play in this position. Now, there are a couple moves that work particularly well here. Both the moves e takes on d4 and also the move knight to e5 should offer some good games or good positions for the white side. I'm going to recommend, however, the move e takes on d5. I think this is probably the best way to hold on to the pawn and accept the gambit and just know the lines to get a good position. The issue I have with knight takes on e5 there are a few more sharper lines to just be aware of. So I'll just show you one of them. After d takes on e4, bishop to c4, there's this very sharp line with queen to g5. Now it is pretty bad here. White actually still holds a strong edge in this position, but it's a very I think very kind of cutthroat line here, I think, to be honest with you. So I don't think you need to go into all these complications. I think white should be able to get a good edge against this without having to go for these particular move orders. So going back to this position, after e takes on d5, there are four different options that black has played on the Lichess database. Two of the moves c6 and queen takes on d5, I think are just downright bad. I think white is going to get a very good position after these two moves, but they've been played a significant amount of time to be worth talking about. But the two moves that I think offer some interesting play for black, albeit white will still get an edge against them, are the move e4, which is the main line, and also bishop to d6, which in recent times has become an interesting option for the black side. This is known as the Maroczy Gambit. And when I've been looking at some elephant gambit books that talk about this particular line, they actually recommend playing the move order with bishop to d6, which I think is quite interesting. Okay, so let's have a look at each of them in turn. So the move c6 is an interesting attempt from black, and I think black, what he's trying to hope for is that white is going to take this pawn, accepting the double pawn sacrifice, and then he's just going to speed ahead with his development. Now, black is down a pawn, but he has a little compensation here. He might be looking to play a move like this and then discombobulate this pawn or something along those lines. But as I say, for the most part, there's not really much to be worried about in this line. If I go back, though, I think the best move here from white is not to take this pawn, though, and actually take here on e5. Now, the reason why I think this is such a good move is that after c takes on d5, you have a very strong and powerful move here, bishop to b5 check. Now we'll have a look at this move in just a minute, but just before that, let's have a look at the other response that black could play in this line after knight takes on e5. That is the move queen takes on d5, and it looks pretty good. You're hitting this knight. The downside is quite clear though. He can't develop the black knight to a good square, and it's funny, when I was looking at this particular position, I suddenly realised that this position is actually a Scandinavian defence, or a weird kind of transposition to the Scandinavian defence, except black is actually down a whole pawn. So it's an even worse Scandinavian defence. I'll show you what I mean. If you come back with a knight to f3 and then something like bishop to g4, it looks scary to begin with, but you just play bishop to e2. Knight to f6 could be played in castles, and this is a familiar looking position from the Scandinavian, except black is just down a pawn. White should be absolutely fine in this position. He's up a pawn, he's safely castles. He's also threatening knight to c3, gaining a tempo on this queen that's stuck in the centre. So yeah, it's just an even worse position for black to play for. So going back then, I think realistically, if black wants to try and play for anything, c takes and d5 seems to be the move here. But there's a very strong response to this. Bishop to b5 check, really strong, because it now essentially forces black to lose a pawn by force. If here he plays the move bishop to d7, we can actually take with the knight, and after the knight comes here, instead of just trading down, which is actually still fine to hold an edge, I think even better here is just castling. You know, black has got this pin knight here, he's safely castled, and black has little to no compensation here. In fact, he's actually been left with this isolated pawn that he has to deal with. Other moves, I mean, knight here is also interesting, but again, well, I say interesting, it's pretty bad. You're just going to lose another pawn. Black's just doing much worse here. So both of these moves, as I say, offer nothing really for black. So going back to our main position, another move that black has tried here in this position is the move queen takes on d5. And I guess this has some similar looking logic to that of, let's say, a Scandinavian defence. You know, black is maybe trying to misplace white's knights by forcing it onto the wrong square. But there's a big difference in this position compared to your traditional Scandinavian defences, and that is the move e5 here is kind of wasted, and actually it's going to become under threat very soon, and white is going to get his pieces onto some very good squares. So actually this move offers some really good chances here for white now after the move knight to c3, c3 now hitting this queen. And really most of black's moves revolve around how do I hold on to this central pawn and not make a complete fool of myself here in this position. Just to show you very quickly, if queen to d8, which is actually a line in the Scandinavian defence, here you can get a clear edge with just knight takes on e5. This is absolutely fine. By the way, in case you're wondering, queen to e7 is not a threat. You can just play queen to e2, guarding this. f6 could be played, but this is nothing. You just move back with your knight and you've got a clear position. If you want to take exchange queens, yeah, you're doing very well here. Up a pawn, got a great position, and black is just doing terribly here. He's got this pawn on f6 that does nothing. Okay, maybe guards this knight jumps, I suppose, but it's now inhibiting his development of his g8 knight. So you've got a very good position here. So going back, instead of this, black could also try a move like queen to a5, which again looks a bit like a Scandinavian, but here you've got a very strong move, bishop to c4, and it's a very different nature, this, to like a normal Scandinavian. You know, black is down a tempi because he's got this e5 move that shouldn't be there, and normally, like also in the Scandinavian again, normally you'll have the pawn maybe coming to e6 at some point, but black hasn't got that luxury here. It's already on e5, and it's basically not stopping this potential threat of this knight jump to g5. Here there's been a couple of options that black has played, but white will get a very big edge here. If he plays bishop to g4, this is actually a bad move, as now white has a very stunning move. Bishop takes on f7, king takes, knight jumps to g5. You're going to pick up that knight, so you're going to be up a clear piece, and black's king is just hopelessly flailing around. If it comes to g6, by the way, there's a very fun continuation here that I thought I would quickly show you. Knight to g6 could be played. Against this, you can actually come back to g3, and if now they play knight here, oh sorry, I messed this up, sorry. After knight comes to f6, you now go queen to c4, and there's a beautiful continuation here. If they take this knight, by the way, this has never happened in the Lichess database, so you know this will be beyond the theory that you need to know. But I think this is a really gorgeous line I was looking at. Queen to f7 here, very beautiful move here, because now it's just simply threatening d4, which is going to be a very nasty check for black to deal with. Now here, if they play queen to, I don't know, b4, trying to maybe get in the way of this check or something, d4 check, it's just so powerful. Now the king comes here, throw in this pawn, throw in this, queen check, bishop here, very, very fun, this particular variation. If they now take here on g1, this is amazing. You can actually win the game here after the move queen to h3, just threatening mate and 1 with queen to f1. If they take the bishop, I found this beautiful checkmate, king to e2. It reminds me of a very famous game, Edward Lasker versus George Thomas. You know, the king ends up going into the other side of the board, and then there's this king to e2 checkmate. Very nice. If you're also wondering, this is also can lead to mate, but it's mate in 2. Here, if they take, then you win in one move with, oh, how do I do this way? Yeah, there we go. Rook to f1, and that is also checkmate as well. Very, very nice. So yeah, you can see here that both of those moves just don't really work. I'm not going to go too much more into this because this particular line, just basically white is going to get a very good position. Oh, I will say, I will mention knight to c6 actually very quickly. Against this, you should do fine after castles. Again, it's just a much worse Scandinavian position. There's no way that white's going to be able to hold on to this pawn. You've always got, if bishop to g4, by the way, again, you've always got this move, which is just devastating. And if knight here, rook to e1, how is black going to hold on to this pawn? Bishop to d6 could be played, but d4, you're just going to attack this. You get the pawn, you go up a clear, you've got a clear pawn up, and you're going to have a much better game. Black's queen is misplaced. It's got no good escape squares as well, unlike a normal Scandinavian. So it's just a much, much worse position for black. So going back to these positions, that's why really black is best option here is trying to hold on to this pawn, but he'll still have a much worse position. Queen to e6 has been played here before. It's the most popular move, but here you can actually you can throw in this check now with bishop to b5, a really awkward move to have to deal with. Couple moves that black has played. If bishop to d7, then you don't take the bishop. That actually helps black equalise, because after the knight captures, he's now got adequate defence for this pawn, so actually you don't want to do stuff like that. Instead, you actually leave the bishops on, you castle, because if they take here, you come back with a knight, you've got threatening this fork. If they try to do this, you throw in d4, try and open up the centre. If they take, by the way, you throw in this. This is a good tactic to remember with this queen kind of flailing around. If e4 is played, knight to g4, this is just very nasty. I found this position quite funny, as yeah, black is just doing much, much worse. Queen here, where you take this pawn now. You can't ever take back. Again, you've got that tactic, so lots of good stuff to play for there. So also c6 can also be played, but this is, I think, even worse for black. Bishop to a4 is good. You're now threatening b3. This queen is kind of asking itself, what is it doing on that particular square? g6 could be played to try and create some counterplay. I mean, again, these are all kind of, it's very suspect, these positions, because I mean, really, if black is having to move his queen around a few times, trying to hit pawns, then something is going horribly wrong in this position. Queen to e2 has been played here. If you capture on g2, then I think white does fine after a move like this. I mean, this is just, what is this position? Is all I can say. d4 is a good move. It's a good move to remember this, actually, because you're just going to take this pawn safely, and you're also helping develop your bishop as well and get ready to castle. So d4 or even d3, these are good moves to remember in these positions. So yeah, another move that's been played here, bishop to e7 is another idea, but you can actually develop quite safely with d3, stopping the pawn coming forward and getting ready to develop your bishop and castle long. Here, a move such as this, well, you've got a very nice position here. This has actually been played before online between 2,000 players, but black has recovered his material at the very least, but his position's pretty bad. He's got nothing developed. You're actually threatening to take here on g7. But white decides, I say actually threatening that, actually bishop there is very strong, so you can't actually do that. So here in this position, after the capture, there was castles long, and you can see here that black is chronically behind in development. It was a very, very short game, this one. After bishop here, the queen came to c7, and after b4, trying to create some counterplay for black, because notice his king is so far away from being able to castle. There was actually the following sequence here, and black got crushed in this position, and he actually resigned pretty much after this move. So yeah, a pretty terrible position for black to have to deal with in this line. So yeah, that's that particular line in a nutshell. Queen to d6 could also be tried here. Against this though, once again you've got this bishop b5 check. It's a very good move to remember in this line, because what it does is it develops this bishop with a tempo, and it doesn't get this bishop trapped behind potentially the queen coming to e2, because this is always maybe a threat from black, is playing this e4 move to try and kick this knight away from the square. So by playing bishop to b5, you stop that from happening. You can now play bishop e2 without any fear. Queen to e2, and then be able to castle maybe on the next move. Okay, c6, bishop to c4. Yeah, this is a fine position for black. I won't go too much more into this, but if, let's say, bishop to g4, you again have this threat here. Very, very nice tactic to remember, and just be up a clear piece. Okay, well, a clear pawn at the very least. Alright, so that queen move doesn't really work in this particular line. Alright, let's now have a look at the main lines here. Bishop to d6 is interesting. It's the second most popular move on the Master Game database, and it's a recommendation in Elephant Gambit books. This is known as the Maroczy Gambit, and the idea is that black is not really trying to keep his pawn here. He's just going to focus on getting his development done and get his pieces out. Against this, white has got a lot of natural, I would say, quite pleasant responses here. I think the best move here is to just play d4, and what this does is it opens up the bishops now, and it strikes in the centre. So white has got a clear threat here. He's going to just take this pawn, and then it's asking this bishop, what are you doing on this square? You've got then two very powerful pawns in the centre without any opposing pawns here. So black has got to react to this. The move that's been played pretty much most of the time here, 87% of the time, e4, but against this you can now play knight here to e5. A very strong perch for this knight. By the way, f6 will never work because you've got queen to h5 check, which is just very powerful. And again, if the bishop were to ever capture here, you've just got this big pawn duo. You know, white has got a great position here. But this knight move also has another reason why it's so strong. After a move like knight to f6, sorry, you now have the really strong bishop to b5 check again. And as I say, this combination, this knight and bishop combination, is so strong against the Elephant Gambit, which I think kind of makes it almost. This is why I think I would consider the Elephant Gambit a bit dubious. It's just this powerful combination of both this bishop and this knight, and it's not really, again, there's not many pleasant choices here for black. c6 has been played in this line, but you just take here, and once again white has got some pleasant options. He can just move his bishop back to a4 or go back to e2. By the way, in case you're wondering, queen to c6 is a move that would go up 2 pawns, but black has got some counterplay with queen to b6, and I think this is actually a little bit unpleasant, this move. So I would say just either go back to bishop to a4 or even back to e2. I think I like the move bishop to e2, as white just remains up a pawn. He's inflicted some weaknesses on black structure, and I think just has a very pleasant position looking to castle on the next move. And I don't really see what black's counterplay here in this position is. He's just got, yeah, it's just a pretty poor position, if I'm being honest with you. So instead of this, the other move, bishop to d7, could be played, but now you can just start swapping off. c4 is a good move. You hold on to this pawn for dear life, and after a move such as castles, you can just castle. You could either castle here. c5 is actually another very powerful move, and just pushing forward. I don't think you need to go too crazy in this line. White has got a very good edge. I think the other move that I was also looking at was just castle simply, and I think that's also fine. White is doing really well in this line. If they ever see a6, then bishop a4 is fine, but actually I think just capturing here, black has wasted tempo with a6, and you just take that knight off and just develop, and you've got a very nice sound game here. I can't see how black is doing any better, has got really any counterplay here. So yeah, I really don't think bishop d6 really offers a huge amount here for the black side. I think really bishop b5 is just so strong against it. So the final move I want to talk about is the move e4, and well, this is the main line, if we can really call it a main line in the Elephant Gambit. This is the whole purpose of this playing this particular way. Black is going to hope that this pawn is going to end up being a huge fawn in white's position. It's almost quite reminiscent of that of maybe like a Falkbeer counter gambit, or like an Alban counter gambit, where this pawn is just going to be an absolute nuisance for white to deal with. Now, there's a lot of ways that white could go wrong in this particular line. The move you just got to remember is queen to e2. Okay, the reason why is the move to remember is every other move, if you move the knight away somewhere, it just equalises for black quite comfortably. He's going to recapture that pawn pretty easily and just have a very good game. So queen to e2 is the one to remember, as it now hits this pawn and threatens to just simply recover. Will go up a pawn and have a good position. Now, there's been 3 different ways that black has tried to defend this particular pawn, and all of them I think offer a decent game for white here. I will just mention very quickly, queen takes and d5 just offers nothing for black here. You just develop this knight and you're just threatening to take this pawn. If, say, the queen comes here, just take it, and you're up a pawn. Okay, they might play bishop here, but d3, you've got an absolutely fine game. You're going to develop your bishop, castle long maybe. I think also bishop e2 and castles here is also fine as well. So white is doing very well in this position. So another move that could be tried here from black is the move queen to e7, trying to hold on to this pawn, but simultaneously threaten to take this knight on f3. Now against this, white, you just have to kind of remember this move, but white just needs to play the move knight to d4. Okay, the other move knight to d1, g1 is just pretty bad. yeah, I think it's pretty obvious you're undeveloping your piece and you're getting yourself further away from castling. So knight to d4 is pretty much the accepted move here to play here on the white side. Now the big downside of playing queen to d7 is, number one, black is not threatening to recapture this pawn, so you're actually up a pawn in this position, but also it prevents black's development, namely this bishop is going to have a difficult time coming out, and normally black wants to keep this bishop on because it can maybe help pin this knight and frustrate white's development in the opening phase. The other problem as well for black here is if he ever thinks he's going to develop this bishop, he's going to be met with this very strong queen to b5 check, which will win a lot of material here. So black is actually going to have a very tough time to develop in this line. So black could play knight to f6. Here you could develop your knight. And what I'm just going to say about this position is that black has not got many pleasant options here whatsoever. I would not want to play on the black side. We've already talked about bishop to g4 and the problems of that move. But there's not really any pleasant moves here for black to play. I will just say one of the most popular moves here, the second most popular move after bishop g4, which is a mistake, is playing the move a6. And well, what can I say? I mean, I guess it stops that threat, but if black is having to play a move like a6 on move 6, in fact, then I think something's terribly wrong in black's position. Here I think very interestingly, I mean both d3 offers a good game, but I really like the move h3 here. You're just gonna make black suffer in this position, and I think that's really the core idea here. Black could play knight b to d7 here now, but there's actually a very powerful move here, knight to f5, because this bishop is no longer threatening to take this knight. You can get in this very tricky knight move. Queen to e5 has been played, but now you can just move your knight back. You're going to recapture this pawn and you're going to get a very good game. So I can't really recommend this particular position more than enough than than I can really. It's just a very, very good position for the white side. Just back to here, just for a moment, another move that black could play here is queen to e5, which does free up his bishop now to maybe come to the square to deal with this threat. But now you can play, there's a couple of, I guess you can say there's a couple of pleasant options here for white, but I quite like just playing knight to f3, taking advantage of this pin. The queen could come back to e7, but the difference in this position now compared to at the start is, because it looks as though we're going to repeat the position, it's going to end in a draw, but actually the difference here is with this knight coming on to f6, this opens up the move g5 now, and this is just going to simply aim to recapture this pawn here on e4. Again, bishop here can be met with this move, so that's not a serious threat here. Okay, it's a little bit better for black in the sense that you've now got c6 in this line, and it's not doing too terribly. But I think white gets a pleasant game after moves such as this. So instead of this, the other move, bishop to f5, which holds onto this pawn, can once again be met with b5 again, and you're just going to take here and get a very good position. If c6 is played, there's a difference in this position, because after d takes and c6, notice if he recaptures, you're going to take this bishop. So essentially you're going to go up that pawn and you're going to get a very good position. If knight takes here, for example, which does look like it's going to attack both of these, this can be met with this, because actually if he does take here, this is not a threat, because now you can play knight takes. After king here, you just take this rook and you've got a very good position here. It's no wonder at this line that white has scored in the 30 games where this line has been reached. white has scored 87%. It's just a dead one position. You're up 6 points in material and you've got a very, very good game. Okay, another move that black could try in this position is the move f5. And really, all I can say about this particular move from black is that white needs to tread a little bit carefully. If he allows this move to be any good, then black can very quickly equalise in this line. So you must play a kind of attacking chess, go after this plan of taking this pawn by playing the move d3. All of the moves will lead to equality for black. Here, there's been a number of moves that have been played here, such as holding on to the pawn or capturing here. But the best move, I think, well, the move that's been played the most is just taking this pawn. After this move, we should hold on to a nice edge with the move knight to c3 here. This does invite the move bishop to b4, but this is all fine, as now we can play the move bishop to b2. If there's a capture here, which is pretty much guaranteed now, to try and get away, to deflect the defender away from this central pawn, then after knight to f6, white has a pleasant option here of being able to take this knight off and then move his knight back to d2. So now hitting this pawn and getting a very pleasant game here. If castles is played, then we can just take this pawn off. We're now up a clear pawn. By the way, just in case you are wondering, after takes here, you might be worried about the move rook to e8, which looks very strong because it now pins this knight. But white has got a very powerful move here. Castle's long, not interested, because the point of this is after the rook is to capture, you can throw this check in, and after you take here, you've actually maintained your being up one pawn, but you've got a very good position here, as black cannot develop any of his pieces on that side of the board. And so basically he's only going to be fighting with rook, and well, you've just got a very good position. This move's coming in, which is very unpleasant. You could try a check here, but you just move up, and what has black actually got in this position? So a very, very pleasant line to play into. Just going back to this position once again, I just also want to briefly cover the move knight to f6 here, as this has also been played quite a few times on the black side, but there's nothing to worry about in this particular line. Just take here on e4, and after f takes, here you can now play the move knight to c3, aiming to recapture this pawn. Now this line is different to the one that we just looked at, in that this move bishop to b4 does not work. The reason why? Well, we've got queen to b5 check, picking up this bishop. So again, that b5 square is a big weakness in the Elephant Gambit. Going back, instead of this, if let's say they play bishop to d6, which is just kind of developing in a similar-ish fashion to that of the Maroczy Gambit, then we can have a pleasant position after recapturing this pawn. If let's say e takes here, then this is fine for black. So instead, black has actually played quite a few times just castles here, and we do need to still be a little bit careful in this line. A couple moves are quite pleasant. Knight takes here is absolutely fine here. It guards this potential skewer against the queen, but I think a much more testing move here is actually the move bishop to g5, and what this does is it is essentially just developing and getting ready to castle long to get off this open e file. If rook to e8 is then played, we can now take off this particular piece, and then we can throw in this check. Very nasty, as now it forks both the king and the rook. If queen were to take, you take this rook, it's removing the defender, so a very nasty tactic there. But it's quite important that you don't rush in this position after this by taking here. I think actually this gives black some options after queen takes. This is actually not a terrible gambit line for black, as he's got quite a bit of development. He might at some point threaten this as well, So just don't go rushing in too quickly to try and get an edge in this position. So that is why in this position the most played move is knight to f6. This just has the simple plan of holding on to this pawn, and black is maybe threatening here to play queen takes on d5 to recover his lost material. Quite often, however, in this particular line with the elephant gambit is black will often part ways anyway with his e4 pawn and maybe hope he can get some adequate counterplay, but I would say that white should still be able to hold a good edge against this. Essentially, black's strategy here is to now intensify his pressure on this pawn with moves such as d3, and then maybe playing the move knight to b to d2 to attack this pawn. So here, against this move, white has normally played d3, going on with that strategy. And here, black has normally played the move queen takes on d5. Now, you've got to be a little bit careful in this particular line, because coming to c3 with the knight actually will give black some chances to equalise due to the bishop coming to b4. Sorry. So just to show you that, if you play this, the bishop comes to b4, and again, what's interesting about this line is white should be able to still hold an edge here, but he's got to be careful in his next move here. If he plays bishop to d2, actually black is doing really well after bishop takes. If the knight were to recapture here, black gets some very interesting counterplay after a move such as this. You can now take here, and there's this equalising ending where in actual fact black is doing much better. You can see he's up an exchange in this line and is doing extremely well. So you've got to be a little bit careful in this particular line due to some of the complications that could occur. So instead you need to play the move knight to d2, and you're going to reroute this knight. But after bishop takes and pawn takes, okay, white is still objectively better. He's up. He's going to go up a pawn here, but I think black gets some counterplay here. Namely, he's got these double pawns and this isolated pawn that he can maybe go after. And I'm not sure that the edge that white gains in this line is that significant. So going back, I think instead of all of this, a better continuation is playing knight b to d2. Simple idea here. Going to recapture this pawn, and there's nothing that black can do about it. He's just going to go down the pawn. Normally in this line black will play a move such as bishop to e7 to just gambit the pawn straight away, or knight to c6. So just basically parting ways with this pawn, and you're just going to be up a pawn. But what they could try and do here is hold on to the pawn with bishop to f5. It looks tempting. The problem here is actually this line is tactically losing for white. You just take here, forking these two pieces, and it doesn't matter which way black recaptures here with either the bishop or the knight. Again, it looks like it should be fine. If the knight were to recapture, the key move here is actually knight to h4, hitting this bishop. And what's unfortunate here is that, well, basically black is going to lose a lot of material. If you come back simply with the bishop, let's say you come back to g6, then you just capture, pawn takes, and then you go up a clear piece. So you remove one of the defenders to do that. If g6 is played, then you just take here. After g takes, you now play f3, exploiting this nasty pin. Black is doing absolutely fine here, and well, all other moves don't really work. You might try bishop b4 just to be a bit crafty, but c3 everything is hanging in this line. So yeah, very bad. And also, if the bishop were to recapture here, the key move is not playing knight to h4, but this very strong knight to g5. what's really nice about this is now if the queen were to take, you take here with the knight, regaining the material because you've pushed that queen away. If now the queen comes here, you can just take this, you get a comfortable edge. A very, very good position. Black is going to end up having to double his pawns, or if he does take, he has to double the pawns because of the check, sorry, then you just got a very good position. You don't need to take this queen, this actually helps black out because you've undoubled his pawns. But here you can just play bishop to f4, a very strong move because it forces white to part ways with his queen. You've got the very strong bishop pair, you've got clear weaknesses to go after, and you've got a great position to play the rest of the game with. Okay, so both, as I say, bishop to f5 doesn't work in this line. You're going to go up a pawn. If, let's say, bishop to e7 here, which has been played the most, you just take this pawn and you've got a comfortable edge. I don't know really what more you want in this position. What's great about this is after the queen comes to a5, let's say, a bit like a Scandinavian, then you can now play queen to b5, and you're just looking to exchange off the queens, be up a clear pawn, and have a great position in this game. Queen takes, just to show you how this could go. Now this is a very nice move because this frees up your knight to maybe come to move squares like b3 to get your bishop out and complete your development. A great line to play here. And other moves that black can play, again, if you try to play a move like here, then you just throw in this queen b5 move to try and force an exchange off. Queen to d8 also falls victim to a move such as this, and you just get your pieces developed. You've got a very nice position here, so I don't believe in this bishop to e7 move. Also, knight to c6 could also be played. This is probably the more trickier line to remember. This is still the main line according to the master game database, but here you just play takes here. And what has been played on the human, the master game database, not humans masters. So here, against both of these moves, you're going to try and swap off the queen here and go up a clear pawn. So just to show you, queen to b5 has been the most played move here, and a very pleasant position after moves such as this. Same as well for queen to e6. Your strategy needs to be, if you're up a pawn, guys, you know, this is a simple chess, just exchange down and have a good position. So a move such as this is also fine. And that's it for this video. I hope this was useful and has given you some ideas of playing your next game against the Elephant Gambit. If you like what you see, make sure you share this video, like this video, and if you did manage to get to the end, well done, and let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Take care, bye.